What do you do when you're a meek, mild brain surgeon who's been called to the hospital in the middle of the night to perform emergency life-saving surgery on a child, but you get mugged in the hospital car park on arrival? Reality-based personal protection trainer and expert Tim Larkin tells the story because the surgeon was one of Tim's clients, and Tim Larkin gets emotional telling the story. This is an episode of the Comeback Coach podcast you really don't want to miss, and it's coming up right now. Well, here we are now with Tim Larkin, and it really is my pleasure to invite you, Tim, to welcome you, I should say, to the conversation on the podcast. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Now, so many questions I've got lined up, and our audience has been primed with the introduction so they know about Tim Larkin and what your business is and what your modus operandi is and what you're all about. What I'd like to do, if we can, before we get into the meat and the gritty of it all, is to just set the scene with a little bit about your early life and what life was like for you as a boy growing up, because I know that is involved in the overall story. I've seen and heard that before.
Yes. Yeah. My father was an officer in the Navy, and so we moved around a lot. And I lived on Navy bases throughout the United States and overseas. And so combat sports was always a big part of my life. And usually learned from like the Marines and people like that. The last base that my dad was in before he retired was in Coronado, California. And the housing that we had was literally right across the street from the SEAL compound where the Navy SEALs trained. And it was basic underwater demolition school. They had a huge, obstacle course, and it was literally right across this highway that backed up to my house on the Navy housing. And so we got introduced. I think I was about 12 years old when I got introduced to the SEAL teams, and from then on it was just fascinating. So that was my big goal, was to become a SEAL officer. I went through school. I got university, went through school, and did very well. I had a scholarship, a Navy scholarship, to go through training. I got selected to be a candidate for SEAL training as an officer, and that was pretty difficult at the time to do. Did very well in the training because I knew everything about it. But I had something happen during training that kind of completely changed my life. So I was on the fast track. I had finished every hard evolution in the SEAL training. I had already picked the SEAL team that I was going to because I did well enough in training to where I was given a choice, and I was feeling pretty full of myself. And I had basically what we called an administrative dive a couple of weeks before graduation. And during that time, I was congested. I went down and I blew my eardrum. I just, without going into it, I'm trying to give a Reader's Digest version. The reason that's important is because it disrupted everything for me. First of all, it ended my SEAL career before it even started, because I could no longer pressurize dive with my ears. The damage was extensive. That said, they kept me in the community. I couldn't be a SEAL operator, but they kept me in as a special warfare intelligence officer. Now, this was the first time in my life that I had ever dealt with true injury to the human body.
Right.
And I had no idea at the time how this would become basically the theme, the thing in my life that actually, got me on the path to where I am today. Because the one thing that I learned was, I was unstoppable back then. I was bigger, faster, stronger. I was the number one guy in my class. Nothing could hurt me. I'd been hurt a lot. I've always been able to shake things off, minor injuries and things like this. This was a true injury to the human body where I literally lost control of my body. I don't know how many of your folks know what happens when you break your eardrum, but the semicircular canals of the inner ear empty out and you lose all sense of balance. And so I had no control over my body at that time. You go into what's called vertigo, And it's really disturbing, you know.
You were underwater when this happened. How deep?
Yeah, I was. Yes, I was underwater. I was able to pull myself up because of the tow rope that went to the boat above me. And I was pulling myself up. I felt I was going 45 degrees down. It was really, really disorienting. What's interesting about that, why it's important for your folks to understand that, is that kind of changed everything. I realized that the one thing that kind of bypasses bigger, faster, stronger in any human is the ability to injure that human, and that you take the brain out of the equation. And what's interesting is there's areas all throughout our body, and your listeners have all experienced this. If you stepped on a sharp object or you've touched a hot stove, your hand automatically pulls away before your brain's even informed of what's going on. Same thing when you step on a sharp object, your foot comes up and you respond to that spinal reflex. And what's interesting is we were able to take that information and use that to create basically a way of looking at the human body that allows you to trump bigger, faster, and stronger by learning how to injure the human body. And it's something that is known, you know, in circles, and the circles that it's normally known in are probably the worst parts of society. You know, the prison system, which I studied extensively, and I've talked to many practitioners within, the prison system. I've been able to look at some of the alpha predators and how they look at violence, and it's all injury based. And the reason that's important from a self-defense or self-protection standpoint is because it's the one constant in all human beings, is that we are all vulnerable. No matter how much we build our bodies up, no matter how much we try to condition ourselves, there's areas of the human body that once you understand them, you look at all human beings, believe it or not, the same. Meaning you would look at a 12-year-old girl the same way you'd look at a 280-pound man, as far as, you know, similarities. You sit there and you say, well, they both have a throat, they both have a knee, they both have eyes, you know. It's probably one of the greatest tools you can ever give yourself, is when you make that change. And so the way I was able to evolve in this was when I became an intelligence officer, I was assigned to a command where this is what they were looking at. It was back right after the Berlin Wall came down. And the whole world changed at that point. You know, a lot of listeners are probably, you know, I'm not sure what the age demographic is, but a lot of them probably may have not understand the significance of the change that when the Berlin Wall came down, it was kind of the end of the Cold War. And so everything changed when it came to the military threats, everything changed. And what was interesting was the people that I was assigned to at this command was the top SEAL command. It was Naval Special Warfare Command. It was housed by just the legends of the SEAL teams. You know, the admiral that I had, the admiral that started this command, it was his first, it's the first time this command had been put together. His whole charter was to get everybody ready for what now is coming after the Cold War. And these guys, a lot of them were Vietnam era SEALs and very, very accomplished combat, you know, warriors back then. And they understood. They said, yeah, we have to prepare for something completely different. We have to prepare to be able to put our hands on somebody. You know, we have to actually do house to house. They predicted a lot of what's gone on, you know, since this is almost 30 years ago. And they predicted basically what we're dealing with today and that type of fighting. And they started getting everybody ready. A key component of that was hand-to-hand combat, because we really hadn't trained it since Vietnam, believe it or not. During the Cold War, it just wasn't given any sort of precedence to really train. So I was part of this group that basically was there. I came in touch with a unique trainer who understood injury to the human body. And even though we were looking at all the famous combat athletes at the time, it was this little known individual that we brought in that kind of started us on this path where injury to the human body was kind of the sole focus. And what's been interesting is I had an amazing career that I never would have had if I had done the traditional career that I was going to do in the SEAL teams. I actually was able to do work. I've worked with every unit you can imagine. I've worked with every law enforcement unit that I've wanted to, a lot of lot of groups that a lot of people don't even know exist. Just amazing operators. I was able to do all of that. Big change for me came in 9/11. I was actually training the 8th and the 9th in New York, a seminar. And I was training my seminar. It was literally a block away from the Twin Towers. And the course ended on the 9th. We filmed the course. It was for some international finance guys that I was training. And a lot of them traveled to, countries that to negotiate contracts and things that it was pretty dangerous. Kidnapping was a concern. And so, we were talking about travel requirements. I was showing, on film what you could actually bring on an airplane. And one of the things I was showing was like box cutters and all of this. And of course, less than a day later, the terrorists used box cutters as one of the things that they took over the plane. And so I'd only trained like some corporate people at that point. I really hadn't trained many people in the civilian world, mainly because I thought what I taught was too specific for law enforcement and military, and that the civilians probably wouldn't want to take such a direct application of this information. 9/11 changed all that.
Which, excuse me, Tim, excuse me for interrupting, which that point you've just mentioned there about civilians maybe not wanting to take this kind of information. The UK is an example of that, how you've been how you were or are still banned from entering or presenting this information in the UK?
Yes.
What happened
there? Yeah, the UK, I've been training in the UK. I went to school. I went to London School of Economics for a year in an exchange program. So I've been coming to the UK for almost 35 years.
Right.
And, as a student, as a military officer, and then as a trainer, as a coming over and training my system. And I have great, I've trained the UK military, all aspects of it, and NATO over there. It was kind of a shock. What happened was I did a lot of press. I used to do a ton of press over in the UK. Used to be on the BBC all the time, all the various channels, and a lot of the talk shows. I was on a lot of the radio talk shows. I did a talk show, I believe, in 2000. I want to say it was around 2005, 2006. And the subject was knife crime. Back then, even 2006, it was getting pretty bad. Where I was training, the local MP was on a radio talk show with me. Fairly famous, I guess a very famous talk show. And they had head of Metropolitan Police, former head of Metropolitan Police, a rabbi, this MP, another police official was on there. And they kind of brought me on as the crazy American, the guy who's going to say, kill them all, let God sort them out. And what was interesting was, given the time, that's why I like formats like this, when you don't soundbite this information and you let it get fully explained. Yeah. I came across, at the end of the interview, everybody agreed with me. The only person that didn't agree with me was obviously the MP, because it was her district, and she didn't like the fact that, there's knife crime there, and that, her response of, well, just let the police handle it. I had two police officials that basically said, we can't be first responders in situations like that. So it was very interesting. So anyways, at the end of the interview, and the reason I'm telling everybody this is because at the end of the interview, I went in the green room and I shook her hand. It was her hand. And then I was introduced to her friend, who was another MP, and I shook her hand. That other MP was Theresa May. And
really?
Yeah. So what happened was, and they did not like the way this went.
Right.
And then I didn't think anything of it, it was fine. So years later, you have the riots in 2011. Yeah. I'm asked to comment on the riots. Now I'm coming to the UK 2-3 times a year, and this was in between one of my stays. And so they called me here in the US, and I gave I gave the BBC all my quotes. And at the end of the interview they were doing with me, they said, oh, by the way, we know you come to the UK a lot. Next time you come to the UK, are you planning on visiting any of the riot areas? And I said, well, yeah, I have clients in Birmingham. I've got, clients in London that want to show me what happened in Tottenham. And I just named off a couple of places. And all people wanted to do was to show me that the principles that I train, my main goal with everybody is to make sure that you avoid the avoidable. And they were going to show me, because of the methods that I taught, that they recognized things were going, what I term asocial, meaning imminent violence is about to happen. And they were able to recognize those cues and get out. That was it. I left it at that. Everybody reported it straight. Guardian did, all the different places reported it right, except for the Mirror. The Mirror put a article together that said Larkin to lead riot tour. And yeah, so they literally thought I was going to go around and rabble rouse and encourage vigilantism.
What?
And I didn't think much of it. I thought it was kind of funny and everything. What I didn't know was that MP, who was Theresa May's friend, she used that article to send to her. And Theresa May at the time was the head of the UK border, and she's a Home Secretary.
Right.
And all of a sudden they issued a travel ban on me, saying that my thoughts are dangerous for the United Kingdom, and that I will not be allowed to travel in there. It was not delivered to me personally in time. You're supposed to get notice of it. I never received anything. I didn't find out till about 6 months later, when I went to Las Vegas Sky Harbor Airport to fly out on the 4 o'clock flight to London, like I always do a couple times a year. And I knew something was wrong, because they were hemming and hawing as I'm trying to check in at the Virgin counter. And I just knew something was up, just the way the woman was, with me. And all of a sudden I heard from behind me, it's a very packed, that flight is packed. And so, tons of people in this small terminal that we're in.
Mm-hmm.
I hear this, Mr. Larkin, and I can't even do it justice. I turned around. There was this the UK, I think it's UK border agency. He was in a 3-piece suit. All he needed was the bowler hat and an umbrella, and he would have been the impeccable, Brit. And he presented me with my ban, saying that I'm a danger to the UK citizenry, and I will not be allowed to board this flight. Well, and I got to tell you, it was like the parting of the Red Sea. All of a sudden, it went from everybody surrounding me to boom. They thought, "Oh my God, who's this lady? It must be an Irish terrorist."
Is this is this ban still in effect, Tim?
It's still in effect. I do believe that I could get it lifted now. The issue has been COVID. The courts are just very backed up right now. It was there. I was never able to challenge it because of that 6 months that I told you about. That was what they used the excuse. They said, well, you're supposed to respond within 90 days.
Yeah.
And they were trying to say that they had already informed me. And our argument was, well, if you felt so confident that you'd already informed me, why did you fly somebody literally 6,000 miles to Las Vegas?
I think you had the bullshit tipped over you well and truly.
Yeah. And the UK courts just dismissed it for not for hearing the case at all, just from a time limit thing.
Yeah.
So I was never able to bring it. And they have this very vague, it's very different than here in the US. And here in the US, I would have been able to get it heard. In the UK, they have this very vague term that they use where they say it will be reviewed every 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
That's it. So anyways, I think the new administration would probably lift it. It's just, I have to wait until my attorneys
well, it's not like you need the UK. The UK needs you, because I'll tell you why, and I'll tell our listeners why. First of all, I understand you. I've got you pegged as born with brains, and I don't mean that in any way to be disparaging. It's a compliment, because you're a big, tough-looking bloke, and you would have been, I imagine, even more threatening looking as a younger bloke. You're highly intelligent, well-educated, and this comes across in your videos, which I will be at the end putting, Tim, I'll be putting in the show notes links to your YouTube channel. I really want the audience to go and watch some of your videos and to get your book too, which I'll mention here, by the way. I've got the title of the book here. Just bear with me. Here it is, because you're an established author now. Survive the Unthinkable, A Total Guide to Women's Self-Protection. And promoted and vouched for by none other than Tony Robbins, who I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, is one of your private clients from the past. Would that be right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So your client list reads like a who's who of who's important in the world, celebrities, all the rest of it. But look, the reason I say is I get you and I understand you is to set it up that I can understand why some people at first wouldn't get you and would misunderstand you, because you make some provoking statements, which you well and truly explain if people take the time to listen, which is why we're having this discussion. Because the podcast is the Comeback Coach podcast, and predominantly the people watching you now and listening on this podcast, watching and listening to the replay, are people who have an interest in coming back from some kind of an adversity, some kind of a setback in their life, getting their life back on track. Now, why that appeals to me to have you in this conversation is nothing better than to prevent the kind of a comeback that would be required if you are the victim of violence. And this is where we get right into the meat of this. You are a world-renowned self-protection specialist. Keyword protection, as opposed to self-defense. Can you please just clarify your difference on self-protection versus self-defense in today's society?
Yeah, the words matter. And, you know, people might think you're playing semantics by saying defense. Self-defense is a legal term. You know, it really doesn't define anything for us. Self-defense is basically when an act of violence occurs, you know, society never approves an act of violence immediately. What happens is the act of violence happens, and then it is looked at, the police show up, and then they get all the facts, and they find out, okay, this person did this person did this. The actions that you took, if they are justified, they will be determined to be self-defense. And that goes on. Self-protection is really what you're using. And self-protection is really what I'm about. I'm about you protecting yourself, being proactive. Defense sometimes puts you, when you use the word defense, it's really putting you behind the 8-ball. Because especially in a situation where you have to use a tool of violence, you want to make sure that you are not only protecting yourself, but that you're getting a reaction, that you are making sure that you're causing the person to react to what you're doing rather than trying to react to what they're doing. And it's a very specific, way of thinking. You have to be careful how you term things, because we do things well-meaning. We like terms. You know, I would take this back even in the United States. In the United States, the military, our government used to have the Department of War, and we call it now the Department of Defense. And what's interesting is all of a sudden, when you have Department of War, that's very clear. You have one goal. You're there to use everything that the military has to win a war. Right. When you say defense, that can be used all over the place, and it does. It gets misused all the time. The mission gets unclear, and it's there. You do not want to do that to yourself when you are learning how to protect yourself. You want to make sure that you have very clear understanding, and you want your terms to be clear. The reason I use violence and not fight, people say, well, aren't you teaching people how to fight? Well, fight's a very imprecise term. Yeah. You can fight with your wife, you can fight with your friend, you can fight with your boss, that we're not really sure what that means. When you say violence, everybody understands, oh, okay. This is something where people are physically engaging in violence and trying to injure each other. And so I try to be very specific in my terms, and that's why, and do I pay for it? Absolutely. There are times where it's easy to soundbite me at times and make me sound like a psychotic, that I'm advocating violence, and nothing could be further from the truth. I think the problem is what I like,
Tim, excuse me, here's what I like. Okay. One of your videos, training videos on YouTube, is of two elderly people at an ADM at 10 p.m. and they get mugged and they're left on the ground. I presume they survived because it didn't look like there was any serious injuries, but you use this as an example. And that's a video that the viewers will watch. Here's my take on it, because to hell with political correctness, right? My view, to hell with political correctness and wishy-washy vernaculars and lexicons and things. If somebody's coming at me at 10 o'clock at night at an ADM with a knife, in my mind, is kill or be killed. And you don't say that. I'm not quoting you. This is my terminology. But what you do say, and I can quote you, is when violence is the answer, it's the only answer. And that's very much your message. It's very much what you teach. Yeah. Some of your blog post titles I love. I must ask you, do you write your own blogs and blog posts?
Yes, I do.
Wow. Yes. You are very, very clever, because these are deliberately provocative and they stimulate curiosity and intrigue. 3 of them that caught my eye: the mindset to survive and the will to win. I love it. Time to stop lying to yourself. What's that about? And nailing down intent. So EFT, target focused training. What do people get from Tim Larkin when they subscribe, enroll, get hooked into your world, the world of Tim Larkin, on Planet Tim, and they're into target focused training? What's that all about?
My goal with everybody, I think probably the way I'd put it is, I have a friend in the industry, and he was flying home one night, and he was very tired after training a seminar, and a woman asked him, "What do you do?" And he was kind of tired, but he just said, he goes, "Oh, I teach self-defense." And as soon as he said it, he was like, "Oh no." And of course the woman started saying, "Oh my gosh, I've always wanted to learn self-defense and blah, blah, blah. I really want to do this, you know." And he stopped her, and because he's being a little abrupt, and he said, "No, you don't." And she said, "What?" And he goes, "No, you don't," because he's looking at her. She's middle-aged. He said, "At this stage of your life, if you really felt that way, you'd be like me. You'd be training this all the time. You'd be into it. You know, it would obsess you at this point." He said, "What I think you meant to say was, how can I live a life that minimizes the need for me to ever use self-defense?" And he said, "I can teach you how to do that." And that's what I found most people want. And so target focused training handles both sides of the equation, meaning I'm not all about just, you know, yes, I want you to avoid all the avoidable, but the quote that you were talking about goes like this. It says, "Violence is rarely the answer." And everybody loves that part of the quote. The second part is, "But when it is the answer, it's the only answer." And that's probably sums up target focused training. I make it very clear for my people what you would ever have to respond to, and all the things that you think you might have to respond to, but don't. And that's probably the greatest service I can give everybody, is the understanding of what you really have to respond to. And then if, God forbid, it is a imminent violence and you have to use the tool of violence, I am going to give you very specific instructions on how to best use the tool to get the results that you need to survive that situation. And so it's a really, what I love is, the more somebody understands these methods and principles, the more peaceful life they live. They stop making, you know, decisions like the ATM that you're talking about. What's interesting about that video with everybody is, when I showed that ATM video, everybody was like playing it out, like saying, well, you know, they weren't situationally aware that, you know, the husband should have been looking out this way, and then, you know, he would have seen the attackers. And nobody looked to the timestamp that you talked about to say, hey, it was 10:23 at night. Why did they have to be there at 10:23 at night? Which we know statistically, you know, your chances of getting attacked go up exponentially. Why couldn't they have woken up 15 minutes earlier in the morning and done that? And they would have avoided the situation completely. I think the other thing I really try to get across to my clients is the fact that I want them to understand that you got to live in the life, you know, the life the way it is, not the way we want it to be. You know, a lot of us get very upset because, you know, we can't do certain things. I have female clients that want to be able to run at night with their earphones on and go unmolested. And yes, that should be the case. Yeah. The problem is, if you put yourself out there like that, your profiling is a much more attractive target, because, you know, you've taken away, first of all, it's nighttime. Second of all, you've taken away a sensory system, and it's easier for you to go. So what they get when they come to me, either through my books or videos or the YouTube, you know, channel that you're talking about, is just little beats, you know, little chunks of that information to make sure that they make better decisions in their life. Because you don't want to have to use the physical training that I give. You don't want, nobody wants to use violence if they don't have to.
I've seen you, or I read you, I saw you speak or read you, because you're on, there's a video of you, so much good information that you give. There's you giving a talk to the Google Corporation.
Yes.
There's a video of that. I think there's a TEDx talk or something similar.
Yes.
There's your short training videos. I've heard you say, now, you're a guy who's highly trained in looking after yourself, and if you have to, you're going to be able to put someone down and put them out of action. There's a terminology you use for that, which I can't think of, but basically you've got to put them on the ground and they don't get up.
Non-functional.
Is it?
Non-functional.
Beautiful. Let me write that down. That's the Tim Larkin quote. Non-functional. Yes. Beautiful. All right. So what I like to hear, what I like hearing you say is that you will avoid that physical interaction, that physical conflict at all costs. You teach your students to, where they can, first of all, avoid. I mean, we just talked about that with the elderly couple at the ADM at 10 p.m. That's a forethought that could be avoided. That situation could have been avoided.
Absolutely.
You'll walk away from a situation, apologize if you have to, walk away, and not be involved in having to use the skills that you teach. But you emphasize that there is the caveat. I love it. But if I'm in the situation where I have no choice,
right,
I know what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
And that's
and that's the key. That's where you provide the clarity. It's that idea of, if there's still choice, it's not time to use violence. Meaning, as unpleasant as it can be, I mean, your ego could take a big hit. You know, the person could be making fun of you, calling you names, being overly aggressive with you. But if you still at that point have the choice to disengage and get out, then that's your choice. That's what you want to do. The only time violence is ever justified is when you're devoid of choice, because it's just too risky to use it for anything else. Because violence, you have no idea. Once you cross the physical plane and you actually put hands on people, you can't control what the outcome is, no matter what your intentions are. And I show videos all the time of two guys, you know, getting into some sort of a scuffle. One guy pushes the other guy, and that guy hits his head and he's dead over nothing, you know, over something completely avoidable. And again, you know, people just have to understand that crossing that physical plane and, you know, putting your hands on another person with the intent to do violence can, you know, you can't always control it. I mean, one of the funniest, not funniest, but one of the comments I always get from people, you know, they'll see something, I'll show some training, and they'll say, okay, but Tim, I don't want to kill him. So how can I, you know, they want to use just enough violence to do something, and they're missing the whole point, meaning
yes,
you don't have that luxury. We can't just dial things back, you know.
This point you've just made, excuse me for interrupting you, but I want to bring this up because one of the training videos or the YouTube videos is of, well, the point made is that you show a video where there's a still frame of the guy on the ground and there's a guy about to lay the boot into the guy on the ground. And you pose the question, what would you do in that situation? And I don't want to let the cat out of the bag because it's a really good delivery of, you make the point. But the point you make in context of that is that those people who are in prison, the violent types, the types that will mug you at 10 a.m., the types that will stick the boot into your face when you're on the ground, they're only thinking, well, you put it in your own words. What am I trying to say? It's your story. Tell the story of what I'm trying to say, Tim, in that situation.
Yeah, basically, what everybody has to understand is we go around in our own world, and we believe oftentimes, because of our circles, our social circles and everything, we think everybody's operating with the same mindset that we have. And the reason I tell people all the time, like I'll show a scenario where there's a knife, you know, you put a knife to the neck and the person's asking for your wallet and watch and everything. And, I have people go through this whole thing. Well, what would you do? And, you know, what do you think? Well, I do this. I would tell the guy he could take this, or you did, you know, they have this whole scenario where they're going to have this exchange with the person. And I go, hey, that's great. That's fantastic. I go, so when was the last time you took a knife and put it up to somebody's neck and asked for their wallet and watch? And you get this blank stare. And like, well, no, I haven't. I go, exactly. So you have no idea what's going on in this person's mind. You know, you can't relate because you would, you know, it's not you. You're not criminal in nature. And the way these people look at things is very different than the way the general public looks at it. And I need to jar people into that reality so that they can better protect themselves. And again, by being blunt and honest about the tool of violence, as I am, it does two things. It really causes people to change. If I have somebody who's coming in because they want to become a better fighter, and I get one of those guys once in a while, I'll show them, right? I'll go, yeah, this is great. I'll show them like 4 or 5 things that just destroy the human body. And the guy will be, whoa, I don't want to do that to him. I go, well, you know, that's it. And not only can I show you how to do it, it's really easy. Like when I show people just how easy it is to injure the human body, they really get disturbed by it. And rightfully so. They're not used to that information. And so once I get that reality through to them, then they start saying, okay, what are all the things I'm doing in my life right now that I potentially could, you know, lead to violence. I could get myself involved in violence. And I call this, a scenario I call about is prior to people coming to train with me, a lot of them were doing the equivalent of sleeping with their head on a railroad track every night. And, you know, hey, last night the train didn't come, so everything must be fine, you know, and they're doing it. Right. What they don't understand is when that train comes, it comes. And if your head is on that track, it's going to get destroyed. Yeah. And so my goal is to avoid all the avoidable. And what I try to do is I just wanted to have you take your head off the railroad track. Yeah. And now you don't have to worry about that train. And there's so many things in life that we literally put ourselves on the railroad track willingly when we don't have to. And once you identify that, it can change a person's life. Those are my best responses that I get from people. When I get an email from somebody saying, hey, Tim, I read your book and I want to tell you about what happened the other day. The old me would have done this, but after reading your book, I recognized X, Y, and Z. I got myself out of there, and now I don't even have to think about it. And that to me is far more preferable than what I get from like my military and law enforcement operators who have to put themselves out there all the time. They do use the violent side of things more than civilians do. I expect them to do well. That's what they're trained to do, and that's what they're volunteering to do. And I'd love to get the feedback on that. But it's way more rewarding for me to get somebody that's just living a great life. And before the knowledge that they got from my book or whatever piece of content they saw, they would have made a decision that would have put them at risk. And now they know the difference and they recognize it and they're able to make the better decision. To me, that's worth its weight in gold.
Oh, how good is it? Let me just give the title of the book again. Tim Larkin, world-renowned self-protection specialist. His book is titled Survive the Unthinkable, a total guide to women's self-protection. But you're not just teaching women. I don't mean just. You're teaching all people of all genders, of all ages, and you don't need to be as big and as thick-set and as dangerous looking as Tim Larkin. You can be, you can, because it's not about strength. And I don't want to steal. I'm conscious of your time here. I just want to say real quick, just this book, When Violence is the Answer, it's available on Amazon, Kindle, audiobook. This is the one that's really kind of like the general public. The book that you're talking about that I did with Tony is specifically for women, and it's great information. I mean, I train women and men the exact same way. I just talk to women a little bit differently about the subject at first, because women have different concerns than men have oftentimes. But When Violence is the Answer is the book that is really, it's the latest book that I have, and it's the one. Could you hold it up again, please, Tim? Just
no problem. Yeah, it's just When Violence is the Answer. This is the hard copy. Yeah, it's on. Like I said, it's on Kindle. It's in paperback now, and
beautiful. Thank you for that. So there's When Violence is the Answer, and then there's the Survive the Unthinkable. And before we wrap up, before I ask you where you would where our viewer and our audience would be most served by going online, I mean, you can just, I'm speaking to the audience, you can just put Tim Larkin into Google and it's all there, but There's a YouTube channel and there's a website, but there's something I want to come back to because I watched an interview you did, a conversation with our mutual friend, British guy, Steve Sims, and you told the story, and I'd love you to finish off on this story, if you will, because, mate, you had me teary. You were moved when you told this story about your client, neurosurgeon, being called late at night to the hospital, and you got choked up telling the story. And
Steve's unfair.
Yeah, go for it. Tell the story, please.
Oh, yeah, it's the story. It couples with what I just kind of generically what I was just saying about, you know, the idea behind this. But we had a neurosurgeon. It was in, I believe, Cincinnati, Ohio, and he was going to the inner city hospital there. He was called in the middle of the night to do an emergency surgery on a 8-year-old's brain, a 8-year-old boy. He goes in, excuse me, he goes into to park his car in the structure, and he gets attacked. It's in a bad part of town, obviously, and he literally immediately gets attacked. He's able to use some of the principles and methods that I had. He actually physically had to protect himself, and he was able to take out the first attacker, and then he put one injury on the other attacker, and that guy just took off. Security came down. They arrested the guy, got him in there. The surgeon goes in and he performs the surgery, saves the kid's life, comes back. First thing he does is he writes, you know, back, I joke because now it seems, you know, archaic, but he actually wrote a letter to us because it was pre-emailed this. And he thanked me, you know, he just said, hey, he goes, you saved 2 lives. He said, you saved my life. And he said, you saved the life of the kid. And yeah, it was amazing because, again, you know, when I hear from military law enforcement, people like that, you expect them to do well. You don't expect a surgeon trying to save a kid's life to have to fight for his life to go in. And the fact that having my information made a difference, yeah, it was very powerful.
Well, let me tell you, my friend, I love you, man to man. I love that story. I love that you are able to let emotion come to the surface and not feel any shame, embarrassment, or anything about it. I mean, here's Mike Searles talking to Tim Larkin about it. But that's what one human to another, all right? And one bloke to another. I think it's great. I think it's terrific. I love you for it. And thank you for telling that part of the story. So you have literally saved lives directly by helping people with self-protection, and indirectly you helped save an 8-year-old boy's life. And we've all got kids and grandkids in my case, and that's why we're moved by such a story. Tim, this has been the conversation I knew it would be, and you've got a terrific story. I think you're a wonderful guy. You know, I've got a very, very sensitive bullshit radar. Being Australian helps, and I can smell it a mile away, and you have none of it on you. You're the sort of guy I would want to learn self-protection from, and that's why I brought you onto the podcast. So my audience, my listeners and viewers, get to know about you and get to you. Now, where do they go to where's the best website they can go to, Tim?
You know, you mentioned my YouTube channel is great. You know, just Tim Larkin YouTube channel. They do that. There's lots of free content there. I have to be careful what I put on YouTube. So if you go to 𝗧𝗶𝗺𝗟violence.com and you just sign up for a free masterclass, and it is free, there's nothing there. I go really in depth on a lot of the subjects that you and I just talked about, and it'll really give people a really good understanding of the principles and methods that we've been talking about.
Wonderful. 𝗧𝗶𝗺violence.com.
Yep.
I'll put that in the show notes as well. My friend, my new friend, Tim Larkin, what a pleasure it's been speaking with you. You look $1 million. You picked the wrong career. You should be a movie star. You've got a movie star look about you. You've got obviously a tough way about you, but I think you've got a heart really soft.
Oh, believe me, it only works on people that don't know me. My kids just laugh at me. So
isn't that always the way?
It is. They take you down a couple of pegs. It's actually good.
Kids do. How old are your kids, by the way?
56.
How old are they?
I'm 56.
You're 56?
Yes.
And how old are your kids?
Oh, the kids are, I have 7-year-old twin daughters. I have a 10-year-old boy. And then my oldest is 26.
I was going to say, if you've got a 56-year-old kid, I want to drink what you're drinking.
Oh, that would be amazing. Yes.
Yeah, Tim, thanks again. You've got a day ahead of you there. Thanks again for joining the Comeback Podcast, the Comeback Coach podcast. And again, the website for Tim is surviveviolence.com. In sayonara, and to the audience, I know you will have enjoyed this. Do take my recommendation. Go to surviveviolence.com, put Tim Larkin into Google, find his YouTube channel, watch some of his content. You'll be blown away, and you'll probably stop thinking about defense in the way that you think about self-defense, and you'll start thinking in a new way about how to protect yourself. And I can say it because Tim probably can't say it or won't say it, but us Aussies do say it. Sometimes it's kill or be killed. They're my words, not Tim's. That's my take on it. Tim, thanks again. I hope we can have another chat sometime.
You got it, my friend. Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.